The Natchez Trace is an historic trail in the southeastern United States that stretches from Nashville, Tennessee to Natchez, Mississippi. At its height, the trace was used as a silk road of its region, connecting those on the trace and everywhere between in trade and building family and community. In modern times, due to the popularity of cars, trains, and airplanes, the trace has fallen into obscurity and few historical markers remain, sans a monument to Meriwether Lewis, who died while on the trace. The few who remain in Rodney, Mississippi, located along the Natchez Trace, have preserved their history and would gladly sit down and talk with curious adventurers about the residents of yore, of all the events that happened once upon the Natchez Trace.
Oh, what a man, now this is true. He had two faces, so help me God, would I lie to you?
This is the premise of the 1975 Broadway musical, The Robber Bridegroom. The musical, a fictional account of events in the real Rodney, Mississippi, follows the courtship of Rosamund Musgrove and Jamie Lockhart and the extreme jealousy of Rosamund's stepmother, Salome. The musical had its premiere in 1975, went on tour, and returned to Broadway in 1976 with a slightly revised score and book. In the initial productions, Patti LuPone played Rosamund and was nominated for a Tony Award in 1976. Barry Bostwick, who had previously starred in Grease, portrayed Jamie Lockhart and won the Tony Award for Best Leading Actor in a Musical in 1977. The book by Alfred Urey was also nominated in 1976. So, there must be some truly good stuff in here. Good and just so weird. And you might be asking yourself, why have I never heard of this show even though it's garnered some critical praise? And to be honest with you, I'm not totally sure. I hadn't heard of it either until it was announced as part of my college's 2018-19 theater season, and it has stuck with me ever since. But what is the allure of The Robber Bridegroom, and why haven't you ever seen it?
What's for the Natchez Trace?
The evolution of the show is quite fascinating, as it has taken hundreds of years for the story to come to what we know it today. The musical is based on a novella which is based on a Grimm's fairy tale. The fairy tale, which follows a young girl recently betrothed to a man she doesn't know, follows a trail of ashes set forth by her lover, which leads her to a desolate cabin where an old woman lives, who is supposedly the house mother of a band of robbers, one of whom is her betrothed. The young girl hides as the robbers come back from thieving. They have another young woman who they plan to eat and kill, and cut off one of her fingers to get at her gold ring. The finger bounces away and settles in the hiding girl's lap. The old woman drugs the men, causing them to fall asleep. The women escape, and on the day of the wedding, the bridegroom urges his wife to tell a story, and she tells the tale of the finger. She produces the finger, evidence enough to convict her husband of murder, and the whole band is put to death. The subsequent novella takes the story, mostly in title, and transfers the setting from England to 18th century Mississippi. Additions to this version by Eudora Welty were the young girl's stepmother, Salome, the bandits Little Harp and Big Harp, and Salome's lackey, a stupid young boy named Goat. Welty's retelling of the story reads as a farce, with characters coming in and out of the narrative when convenient. Elements of Cinderella and Snow White, namely in the dynamic of Rosamund and Salome, are much more apparent. There are also moments of mistaken identity amongst the characters. The main conflict, debatably, hinges on Rosamund not recognizing Jamie Lockhart as a bandit due to half his face being obscured by berry juice. And you just have to buy it, because it's a fairy tale. Don't think too hard. Welty added things into the musical that have a basis in reality. Little Harp and Big Harp, the secondary antagonists of the story, are based on real-life bandits Micah Big Harp and Wiley Little Harp, who terrorized travelers on the Natchez Trace from 1799 to 1803. After being captured and executed, they remained in folklore for generations, even making a small cameo in the 1941 film version of The Devil and Daniel Webster as part of the Jury of the Damned. In the musical, Big Harp, the smarter of the two, is ironically caught for stealing and is executed. His head is saved by Little Harp and remains sentient, occasionally giving advice to Big Harp. You know, pretty normal stuff. Little of the material from the fairy tale to novella remained, but from the transition to novella to musical, pretty much everything was retained. The only addition to this new medium were the songs, lovingly crafted by Robert Waldman and Alfred Urey. The first Broadway production ran for one preview and 14 performances before hitting the road and embarking on a year-long national tour. Throughout its travels, Producers of the show found there were improvements to make to create a more marketable musical. When the show returned to Broadway with a revised score and expanded book, it was a hit. Additions to the revival included several songs in the form of square dances, recitations, and a finale reprise of the opening song. One song, The Real Mike Fink, was cut between the two productions. Otherwise, all songs were retained, rewritten, or expanded. Those runs were both short-lived, but qualified to be nominated for awards in their respective seasons. The show was a favorite at the Drama Desk Awards in 1976 and 77 with a total of 15 nominations. While not quite musical theater standards, a few tunes you might recognize are Rosamund's Dream,
A fine young king on a stallion tall will to my window ride.
The Prickle Pear Bloom,
I bear a bitter truth, my bosom droops with gloom. The world prefers the lily bud to the prickle pear bloom.
and Sleepy Man.
With some heavy seas, but you done your best, sleepy man. Let your
The musical is produced in a bluegrass style that is relatively uncommon in the Broadway circuit, but creates a special viewing experience because it really is just so much fun.
I'm coming! He's coming! I'm coming! I'm coming!
The show is goofy and not overly serious, which works to its advantage. The character of Salome particularly fascinates me. Described as a woman with buzzard eyes, crocodile jaws, and turkey foot claws, she is the primary antagonist and the main obstacle in the way of Rosamund and Jamie. She is jealous of Rosamund's beauty and her husband's apparent favoritism for her due to her resemblance to his first wife. She laments her disdain for this in her song, The Prickle Pear Bloom, a catchy waltz where she also lays out a plan to do Rosamund in by hiring someone to kill her. Everyone in town fears her, even the dumbest of the dumb. A boy named Goat is forced by his mother to accept Salome's offer of pickled peaches and a suckling pig to push Rosamund off a ledge and get a piece of her dress as proof.
Bring me a piece of her dress.
Bring me a piece of her dress.
For proof.
For proof.
And you got you a suckling pig.
And you got you a suckling pig.
When this fails, Salome decides to do her own bidding herself. She gets shit done. And everyone knows if you're a strong woman with clear goals and motivation, the only thing left for you to do is to be hurled over a ravine in a burlap sack in the hopes of getting the sex you were so pleasantly promised. Salome is so deliciously devilish because she knows exactly what she wants and knows how to get it despite her appearance, which is off-putting to say the least. Goat, in a transitional song, warns the townspeople to watch out because Buzzard Woman may sink her claws in you.
Swing your neighbor, don't dare pause. Buzzard woman will sink her claws in you.
People know she's ugly and not to be trusted, but she is resilient in her pursuit nonetheless. And despite all her efforts, she still fails. And it's kind of tragic. Little Harp, as revenge on Jamie, tosses Salome over a ravine after mistaking her for Rosamund. Salome happened to be in the wrong place at the right time and paid the price. It's irony at its finest. And really, it kinda sucks. Even though she's the villain of the story, her story is much more engaging because of her motivation and actions. What makes her more interesting than the typical evil stepmother lies in her Prickle Pear Bloom song, where at least we understand that her anger stems from a place of relatability. She isn't pretty enough to keep her husband's eye. It may be a little extreme to kill off his daughter, but we all have our junk. Salome's henchman, the well-meaning Goat, is another character that is worthy of discussion. Seemingly, Goat does not add much to the story, but is much more integral than one may think. Because of his stupidity, his brain is the size of a scuppernong seed. By the way, he follows Salome's directions literally, frustrating her. He follows Rosamund's dress after it is stolen from her by Jamie instead of killing Rosamund like Salome wants. His insistence on his payment suggests some kind of intelligence, at least for a job well done, as he would put it. His failure in first-degree murder leads Salome to send him again to find Rosamund, and he runs into Little Harp, who promises Goat more than just a suckling pig for his efforts. Little Harp, who's into women who are tied up and gagged and helpless, big oof, more on that later, offers Goat whatever he wants, including Big Harp. Goat is unsure of how to find Rosamond and instead passes off his sister Airy as Rosamond, placing her in a burlap sack so Little Harp cannot tell the difference. Jamie later tricks Little Harp into freeing Airy, leading to Little Harp's revenge on Jamie and Salome's death. So, really, we could blame Salome's death on Goat, but we would also have to assign Rosamond's safety to him as well. Goat is influenced by the women around him who are all moderately more intelligent than he is, Sansa's sister, and he doesn't question their authority. Goat is a feminist, confirmed. Hashtag Goat for she. So, unpin Little Harp's BDSM obsession. Goat's run-in with Little Harp is problematic in that Little Harp, not so subtly, implies his ideal experience with a woman is if they are completely incapacitated. This is icky for obvious reasons, but becomes even more off-putting when we see that it definitely almost works, and Goat sees no problem in giving him what he wants. Through a modern lens, the trading of human beings for sex is definitely illegal, and those non-consensual acts are what we call rape. Part of the danger in the story when it comes to Little Harp is that he definitely almost gets away with it until Jamie frees Airy unwittingly. Hypocritically, Jamie, who is also the Bandit of the Woods, how did I not mention that before, has the same morbid obsession with non-consensual sex. In his song, Love Stolen, he laments that he is turned off at Rosamond's willingness to have sex with him when he would much rather steal it from her as a robber would. Jamie, by day, is a stand-up fellow who is called in to save Rosamond's honor after her clothes are stolen by the robber who is actually Jamie. The audience knows the truth about his true nature, but it can be testy when he knocks Rosamond out before having sex with her. Yeah, it's fine. But really, it's not fine, because these plot points, while necessary to the story, represent a dated idea of what a heroine is. It would be more difficult to have an Act 2 without Little Harp and Goat's interactions, but tweaking the Jamie-Rosamond bit would be easier without altering the story. Instead of knocking her out before having sex, the production at my college decided it would be less questionable to have Rosamond and Jamie play a cat-and-mouse game, with Rosamond as a perfectly willing participant and even leading the way for a little bit. He does not knock her out, which erases the actual act, but the lyrics retain an air of nastiness that is slightly muted. And I totally understand the point to be made is sex before marriage is bad and leads to consequences. This idea is more fleshed out in Salome's storyline, as her punishment for being sexually active is death. Hashtag justice for Salome. The show can get away with things like this because it is presented as a fairy tale and things are much more black and white there than in real life. The updates made to the story as done by my college help soften the gross overtones of deviancy and perhaps hurt the show. I'm not advocating for the normalization of rape or whatever, but in this particular work of fiction, the idea of people being punished for their actions because of their actions is part of the point. Rosamond becomes much more problematic because all she really does is seek out her love and is given what she wants in a way where she is unknowingly getting it. Oof. And maybe this is part of the reason the robber bridegroom isn't produced as often as one may hope. The icky parts of the story are far outweighed by the music, clever book, and fascinating characters, but tangling with the iffy issues of sex may be a little heady for community theaters. With a tasteful director and the right actors, these actions can be presented on stage without much concern into a great dramatic potential. But if you can catch a production of the show at a community or regional theater, you should sit back and enjoy the story of a gent and robber all in one. A girl who made the moon burn like the sun, a greedy witch, a man that rich, a brain that big.
Like I said, a hell of a lot happened around here. What about a